Welcome back to the Transform Your Mind to Transform Your Life radio podcast and television show. I'm your host, Life Coach Marina Young, and sitting in the guest chair today is Andrew Daniel. Andrew and I are going to be talking on the topic, how to get out of victim mentality and awaken to your true self. How many of you know that victims have no power? So you have to get out of victim mentality. And we're going to pair it with understanding your true self. In my book, Out of the Snares, I talk about the victim mentality versus being a player. And when you're a player, that means that you're controlling the game. So this is going to be an interesting conversation. Stick around. Welcome, Andrew.
Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. I almost called you Daniel there again. Told you. Guy with the two first names. All right. So let me give you guys a brief introduction to Andrew Daniel. He is an award-winning and best-selling author and director at the Center of Cinematic Development. His Cinematics workshops led the field in video movement diagnosis and advanced intuition development, integrating approaches from embodiment, shadow work, therapy, and spirituality. His book, Awaken to Your True Self, is a Gold Nautilus Book Awards recipient. His first teaching work, Holistic Sex at Mind Valley, provided the world with a new paradigm that bridged the divide between sexuality, spirituality, and the sexes. So today we're going to touch on a little bit of every of those things that is in Andrew's bio. So, very first thing that I want to touch on, Andrew, is that you said you started your career teaching holistic sex at Mind Valley, which is one of the top personal development companies and one of the companies that I follow. Tell us about that experience and what exactly was your course on holistic sex about?
Yeah, so this was a long time ago. I think
you're not that old. Can't be that long ago.
Well, in the term of the internet and Mind Valley's growth and expansion, this was really in the beginning.
Okay.
And right. So they picked up my course. I released this course, and then they picked it up, and it was called Holistic Sex. And the whole premise of it was a paradigm of sexuality that wasn't about men versus women. It wasn't about choosing spirituality or pleasure in sex. It wasn't about going into perversions and kinkiness and guilt and shame and all this stuff. It also wasn't about only ascending the body and not having any pleasure and being ascetic. It was, how do we bridge this together? How do we get men and women and our own masculine and feminine into relationship to heal this stuff, and then also learn how to approach sexuality in a way where we're not ran by guilt and shame and fear and judgment and past trauma.
Nice. So that's where the holistic word came in. So that was, all right. So if I were to expand on that, when you're saying holistic sex and you're saying that you're getting the male and the female together and you're removing the guilt and the shame and all the stuff behind it, and just, but you also said it wasn't about spirituality. So what I'm taking from that is that you enhance the beauty of the union and maybe take it to a higher dimension, but that would include spirituality. So how do we remove spirituality and we include holistic?
No, it does include spirituality.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, right. Spirituality and sexuality. It's not just one or the either. It's both together.
It's both of them. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's awesome. All right. So so that's how you started, and like you said, it was in the very beginning of Mind Valley, and yeah, they do a lot of, that's why I follow them, because they do have a lot. Vision has a lot of courses, and yeah, he's now one. I think he said he's the top personal growth company. All right, so that was I started in the middle. So tell us how
Yeah.
you. I was just curious about that one. So tell us how you came about. What was your journey in it to you writing a course on holistic sex? I mean, how did that come about?
Well, it came about from pain. It came about from I was very young and about 5 or 6 years old, starting school, and I had warts on my hands, and that led to uh, pretty much the next 15 years of my life struggling with rejection, ostracization, um, being unwanted, undesirable. I suffered low self esteem, lack of confidence, lack of social skills. All of this stuff came from part of the theme we're talking about today, which I didn't know then, is that I just felt like I was bullied, unlovable, undesirable, and it was really confusing. And unbeknownst to me then, but later on I realized, what I did was I gave it all meaning. I took it personal and I became a victim. Sure, I was a victim in the sense of people's bullying, but I wasn't. It wasn't all them. I was playing a part in it, and I was also playing a part in me latching onto that identity to garner sympathy and pity and attention, or all these other things. Didn't know it then, but later on I found out that that was really the start of my victim mentality. And then so I just spent the next 10, 15 years of my life really struggling. I was at certain points of contemplating suicide and revenge. It was a very, very dark time for me for certain years in my teenage time period. And during this time, you start 12, 13, 14, young man, these hormones are coming. And ever since, I remember my first crush was in kindergarten. So I loved girls since I was a little boy. And going 10 years of my life being rejected and screwing all of that up really took a toll on me. So I set out to really do whatever it took to figure this out, whatever it took to not hate myself anymore, to make friends, to not be a loser, to get girls to like me, all of this stuff. And then that whole personal development journey quickly really focused me onto relationships and sexuality. And so I started doing all of this transformational work, the self-help, personal development work about improving myself, which helped a lot at the time. And I really got into sexuality. But at the same time, I was learning how to pleasure a woman and heal myself. I was also learning about spiritual concepts, and I was noticing this discord between those things. It's like, wait a minute, how do I reconcile this? Because I think, I don't think you have to give up sexual intimacy and connection in order to have, spiritual awakening or get into heaven or whatever our stories are. I think that they can come together. And not just superficially, but really letting ourselves go into that animalistic, primal, really, really in there, guttural kind of sex without the shame, without the guilt, without judgment, without projection. And it can actually be incredibly healing for both people. And so I was undergoing this process myself. And so that just eventually led to a lot of knowledge and wisdom and experience that I said, I'm not seeing a whole philosophy. I'm seeing like Tantra or Taoism or BDSM or, everything was.
Tantra. I taught it because that's the only one I know. I taught a tantric when I was talking about, going from the physical and getting into the spiritual and all that stuff. Go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. And so the thing was, they missed the other pieces. It's like, all right, you can have this really ascended, conscious, beautiful thing, but then they abandoned and rejected multiple orgasms. And it's like, it's like, no, like this can all be together. And then there was also a separation between actually knowing how to pleasure and understanding these masculine and feminine polarities with healing. And so I realized all of it's connected. There's a tremendous amount of healing both men and women, all of us need. And there's also mindsets. There's also approaches. There's also practical things and belief systems that some are helpful and some are not helpful. And so I kind of wanted to bring it all together into one place and unify that rather than have these separate, discorded ways of approaching it. And so that was holistic sex.
Yes, I like that. You touched on a whole bunch of things there, right? Yes, you touched on the guilt and the shame. And the only one I can speak from is from Christianity. And Christianity, the guilt and the shame is only if you do it without being married. Well, once you're married, then it shouldn't cross over. But you're right.
Shouldn't.
The mindset. You're laughing, right? Because the mindset crosses over, because you can't really leave it at the door, right? It crosses over.
Yeah.
So I understand why that course why Mind Valley would pick up that course, because it's fundamental to our existence, and so I'm glad that you did that, right? So. Yeah. All right, so that's perfect. That's a great introduction, but you're right. That's not what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to talking about. So I understand how you married the sexuality and victimhood from the experiences you went through in childhood, and you also married what you talk about in your book, Awaken to Your True Self, from your experiences as a child and teenager, being bullied and being a victim. So but you also say something that's interesting that I had never heard before, so I would love for us to spend a few minutes there. You say that sometimes intellect slows us down, and that there's certain intellectual types that struggle with awakening to their true self and victimhood, I'm assuming, right?
Yeah.
Yes. So yeah, explain what are the intellectual types of struggle, and what you talk about in your book about that.
Yeah. So what I found out. So one of the things in my long bio that we didn't get to was the fact that I had a software company, and so because of my childhood, I was really smart, really intellectual, and then what also happened was I was in a lot of pain, and I was bullied and made fun of, and that caused me to go inwards, and inwards allowed me to play video games, read books, and work on computers, and so that led me to being able to have a software company at 18 years old with Fortune 100 clients.
Nice.
Particle effects and physics engine, and I coded all of this stuff myself to create special effects, and it just came out of passion. So the reason I say this is because I was operating from a very intellectual place, and within a short amount of time in my life and my business, I reached an upper limit of that, an upper limit of the intellect. And I realized there's a difference between intellect and intelligence. The intellect is like a regular computer, right? The intellect, ones, zeros, it has operations, there's systems. It's really good at solving those kind of things. Now, intelligence is more like a quantum supercomputer. We don't really understand it, but it still works and it's still there. And that's what the easiest thing is the intelligence of our body, right? We don't have to sit here and think about how that mitochondria, the hundreds of them in each cell, change ATP into energy, and then that whole chain of molecules. I mean, there's trillions and trillions and trillions of these operations and things happening in our body all the time that we have no idea of, and yet it works, and it's happening.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's been doing it for millions of years.
Yeah.
So that's not our brain doing that. There's something else. And this is where it almost is kind of the line, the connection into intuition. And that intuition goes beyond just ourself. We're plugged into something greater than ourselves. You see birds as they flock together. They're not analyzing the trajectory of the bird next. They're connected. There's a certain connection with spirit, God, whatever you want to call it. There's this something beyond ourself that connects everything and moves everything. It has an intelligence that goes beyond a simple intellect. And so I found that for many very successful people, a lot of them were trapped in their intellect. They developed this really powerful computer in their head, but they didn't know how to tap into their gut.
It's true.
They didn't know how. They started judging feeling and emotion and became superior. So these are some of the intellectual types that struggle, because one of the things that happens, I think, is that, we're not born this way. We're born in feeling. And one of the things that happens, I think, for these very intellectual types is that there's some sort of trauma. There's some sort of emotional pain. They were rejected. They were neglected. They were abandoned. They were hurt. They opened up to somebody and they were let down. Something happened where they felt an amount of pain and they said, never again. And so they started pushing that down and judging it and trying to become superior to all of these human emotions, and they become robots. I mean, you've seen people in the world that are completely numbed out and shut down from any emotion and feeling, and they literally look like androids. Well, that's a problem. That does create suffering because you're completely disconnected from life. You're just a program in a computer somewhere. You're not part of this whole thing and feeling and experiencing. So that's one of the things that I struggled with because I was trying to figure it all out in my head. And by learning how to drop into the body and feel through life rather than think through life, I became a part of it. I became in life rather than a dissociated observer that watches their life go by like a movie.
Yeah, that's great. I basically love what you're saying, but as you're talking, I remember that in my culture we would have a name for someone that's book smart but not street smart. Book smart means that you're just you're right, the ones and zeros, and the intellect, but you can't function under, we call it the street, which is the major intelligence of the world, right? You can't. You have no idea how to deal with people. And you're right, the emotions or the things that happen on the street, which is why we call it street smart. But you said it so beautiful that, yes, if you were, but you're making also a link to the people that, become like a robot is because someone hurt them, and which is basically the victim mentality that we're talking about here. The theme of our conversation, they had the victim mentality. So they shut down and they put this armor, we would say, around them so that nothing would get in. But also what happens is because nothing is getting in, then they're not connected to the universe, and they can't appreciate the birds that fly and
or even the people in front of them. Yeah.
What was that?
And even the people right in front of them. Yeah,
right.
They can't.
Exactly. Right. Because they're closed off. So that is great. So that's the intellectual type that you're talking about. The people that are all in their head, and a lot of times people go around and calling it another word too. They're saying that they're logical, right? And you have these people that says, you know what, I can't believe in God because it's not logical, right? So, but you've just said what we're talking about the intelligence of the world, the universal intelligence. Even this morning, I was listening to a podcast, and a guy was talking about happiness and how you've got to believe that the universe is friendly. And if you don't believe that the universe is friendly, then you're never going to be happy, because you're always going to be thinking your way. You're talking about gratitude. You're going to be saying, I'm grateful for this, and this, and you're checking off a list. And he's saying that's not real gratitude. It's also what we're talking about here. You know what I mean? You don't think through life, you feel through life. I love that. And if you've got the victim mentality, then you're not feeling, because you've shut that off.
Well, if you're in this victim mentality, life happens to you. You don't happen to life. And this is what you said right in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And so
yep. Because something happened to me earlier in my life. I was abused. I was one of those children that had, and when I wrote my book, I said right away that I've never attached myself to a victim mentality, because victims have no power.
Exactly.
You've got to become a player. And I used the analogy of a blackjack game, right? Whatever, you're at a blackjack table, and you've got to get to 21, right? And the dealer is showing a 10, and you are showing a couple of 2s. And you might think, but hey, you know what? I got no chance of winning because the dealer has a better shot. But you play with the cards, and if you play in blackjack, that you can get 4 or 5 small cards and still beat the dealer.
Yeah.
So that's what I call it, becoming a player and not a victim. But so we're going to get into your book, how you talk about awakening to your true self, and which is a way of getting out of that victim mentality. So that's awesome. But I also want to touch on the word that I couldn't speak earlier, which is
cinesomatics.
Cinesomatics, right? So you've become, that's your work, right?
Yeah.
So you're using cinesomatics to deal with the victim mentality and to help people awaken to their true self. So what is it, and what makes it so powerful?
Yeah, well, so the victim mentality and this awakening, to your truth kind of process, that's just one aspect of what cinesomatics and the work that I do is. Like in my book, that's just one chapter of 18. So we do a lot of different stuff. But if you're a victim, as you said, that's why I laughed, because you have no power. It's the entire premise of victimhood, is they feel powerless. And so they try to gain power through a victim strategy, which doesn't work. The only thing that works is responsibility. Responsibility is the antidote to the victim mentality. It's not blame. It's not self-blame. You're not blaming yourself. You're taking responsibility, ownership. And the more responsibility you take for your life and yourself and your actions and even the circumstances around you, the better your life works. And so it's not to say other people aren't responsible. It's not to say, the person that did something to you also isn't responsible. They are, but you can't control them. You can do nothing about that other person.
Right.
You can only do it with yourself. And if you give your power away to other people, they're going to run you. The dealer's going to run you. The house always wins. When you're a victim, the house always wins.
It's true.
Yeah. And when you take that power back and, as you said, become a player, you have a chance. Now, it doesn't guarantee success, but I've been hard-pressed to find people that have undertaken that change, transformation, that don't have success. But there's a lot to it. So back to cinesomatics. Basically, let's just speak to the name, cinesomatics. Cine comes from cinema. It's using video. And then somatics is of the body and movement. So what cinesomatics is rather than a heady intellectual kind of coaching or therapy, it's an embodied, feeling-based transformational approach where we use video to record people's movements in their body. Then we play that video back, and I show them the subconscious patterns, hidden blocks, blind spots, archetypes, mythological patterns that define and run their life. And then they get to see that for themselves on video. So I'm not just some guru that they have to blindly believe. This is not a belief-based process. It's right there in front of you. You get to see all of your shadow, your blocks, your manipulations, your light, all your wonderful qualities, and your rejection of them, whatever it is, it comes up on the video through the movement of the body. And so that bypasses a lot of the ego, all of the ego manipulations that a lot of people will do with their therapists and coach. I've met a lot of people that just power trip on conning their therapists for decades. And they get off on it. It's like, well, that's one way to live life. But then it really takes us to the fundamental principle that this work is based off, which is how you do one thing is how you do anything. It's how you do everything. And so understanding that literally the way that you show up in your body shows you how the way you show up in the world. The way you move in your body is the way you move through your life. And how you do one thing is how you do everything. So this video and feedback and movement feeling process really helps people break through when nothing else does.
Yeah, that sounds great. But I'm trying to figure out, how do we do a video that gives you feedback? I mean, tell me how that works.
Yes. So we use very high-end cinema equipment, the kind that's used in Hollywood movies, and then we just have people move. They can dance, they can shake their hands. We have all these different movement diagnostics. So you literally just stand there, not just, but you stand up and you do the movement, whether by yourself or there's partner diagnostics and exercises that we do.
That's interesting.
Then we film it. Then we play that video back, and we sit down, and the clients and participants and I sit down, look at the screen, and I play the video of their movement back. And then I give feedback, and then all of their stuff comes up, and then we do the whole process when you see yourself on video and you're being told, hey, you're actually being narcissistic. You're manipulating. You think what you're doing is making you money, but in fact, you're dumping the money because you don't feel like you deserve making that much money. All of that gets revealed through this process.
Wow. Well, I have a question. What is the psychology?
What is the what?
All right. That's really deep here. Yes. I mean, I see how it will work, but what is the science? Which is basically everybody wants, that's the new word now. What is the science behind, let's say let's take one thing, right? Let's say that I'm dancing and I'm always going to the right or something. Let's use a silly one like that, right? Then you would say that, okay, because you always go to the right, that means something. Where's the science of that coming from?
Well, so yeah, here's the thing that makes this difference is that it's not an analysis. There's no checklist of body language. What I'm doing and everyone else is doing is feeling that movement. What does that movement feel like? When you keep going to the right, what does it feel like? Does it look like you're hiding? Does it feel like you're avoiding? Does it feel like you're finding comfort? Are you avoiding something over on this side? So we look at everything for what it is in that moment. There's no book that has it's no DSM manual. It's all live for the person right in front of us. And then we have the video. So the evidence is in the video. And then when you have groups of people all looking you on video, you can see somebody and you can see if they're depressed or if they're putting on a fake happy mask. We can see this stuff. And so this process is just a formalization of it with a feedback component. So you're there in the session and nobody's asking, well, what's the proof of this? The proof is literally in the way that you're moving, it's on video, and it's in the results of your life. So this work is not evidence-based, it's not belief-based. It's results-based. We actually look at the results people get in their life. And so when I see somebody, I say, all right, I have someone come in for the second level diagnostic assessment, which is the archetypes. And so basically what I do is that I have people show certain concepts through their body. Think of it like charades. It's not as a game, not acting out, but this idea where you can't speak and you have to communicate a concept. Well, I'll do something like show me making money. And there are people that will stand there for 2 minutes without doing anything.
Hmm.
In every single instance, those people are struggling with making money in their life.
Yeah.
Yeah. If they don't have a concept of what that looks like, it tells us they're probably not very proficient at it. So there's all of this understanding of, all right, well, if they take long, if they do it really small, if they say, show me making money, and they're doing something really tiny, they're probably not making millions of dollars. They're probably making, or whatever it is, just as an example. So that's money. There's giving, receiving. If I say, all right, show me what giving looks like to you, and they do this, you're like, wait a minute, that doesn't look like
giving.
Exactly.
Wow.
But in their head, they think it's giving. But in reality, they're taking or something like that.
Yes.
And so
wow.
and so we call that reverse wired. It's the same thing that happens when you find people that have relationships that keep attracting the jerks, the bad boys, the abusers.
Yes.
Because to them,
Yes.
abuse feels like love and love like abuse. And so they have this reverse wiring on the nervous system level. And so through this work, we actually can switch that. We can actually reprogram these neural pathways and get people to flip that and associate love with love and abuse with abuse and be properly wired. And it changes everything in their life.
Wow. This is important work.
Yeah.
Unique work too. I absolutely love it. Now, one of the ones that you talk about is the cinesomatics, helps reveal narcissism. So take us through a movement that would help you because I guess narcissists are selfish, right? Is that what it is? They don't think about anybody else other than themselves.
Oh,
so
yeah. Well, let's start off with what my idea of narcissism is.
Okay.
Because it's very different. It's similar, but it's different.
Okay.
So a narcissist basically does not love himself or herself.
Mm.
A narcissist is in love with their image.
Mm.
So you imagine the myth of Narcissus seeing himself reflected in the pond. That's not himself. That's a reflection. That's an image. And so narcissists are focused on their what's called narcissistic image. For us, in normal kind of people speak, it's our mask. It's the persona. It's the going out and showing up in the world and putting on a face that we think the world wants us to have in order to be lovable, successful, whatever it is. So that's the one element of narcissism where if you understand that it's not actually loving themselves, it's in love with an image, and then everyone around them gets objectified as supply to reinforce and build that image of themselves up. Yeah.
Okay.
And so
that's beautiful. And
yeah,
true.
Yeah. Yes. And once I realized that, it changed my life because it's like, oh my God, I'm so narcissistic. I had no idea. You know, I was just so, and a lot of people, a lot of clients come in that have been doing self-help and personal development stuff for decades. You know, CEOs, or I have people in their 70s and 80s coming in being like, I've done this for literally 60 years of my life and I'm still stuck. Well, these are the stuff that we see. And when you're in that place working on yourself for so long, it all becomes about you. And most self-help work, I don't call it personal development. I call it persona development because it's really just about building a better persona. And so my work is very different because it's about subtracting. It's about taking off the masks. It's not about telling a better story. It's about stopping all the stories. How do we get to that truth of who you are in the lightness and in the darkness?
Wow. I love these conversations. It's so amazing. And the universe must like me, because a lot of times I'm like shocked in these interviews, but I agree to them for a reason.
Well, I was watching one on your YouTube with the EFT tapping. I mean, that was amazing that
Yes,
you went through
right.
that
Yes,
process.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. But that I knew about a little bit before, because I interview a lot of I do a lot of mental health work on here. And a lot of times people come on and they talk about EFT tapping as one of the forms of helping with mental health. So I knew a little bit about that, but I'm telling you that a lot of times I come in on an interview and it goes into a deeper path. Like now, I think I agreed to this because of the victim mentality part, right? And I love that topic. And then I saw narcissism, and I'm thinking, okay, yes, I like to talk about that because I'm very topic oriented on here. I want to give good value. But now we're going into something I've never heard of, and I love it. I love learning. I love
Great.
learning.
Yes. That's the best.
I love learning
Yeah.
with along with my audience, and I know that what and now you've just expanded my mind about narcissism, because when I think about a narcissist in a relationship, I'm thinking of somebody that you're right. It's that they don't care about the other person. They're almost emotionless, right? They're conscienceless. But then what you're saying is that you're saying it's for a reason, it's for a purpose. And when you understand, the foundation, then you understand, how to work with it. So that's good.
Yeah. So I want to go further with what you just talked about. So one of the things that I realized is that narcissists actually do have feelings and emotions. They're not sociopaths. Okay, well then, how do we explain that behavior? Well, we explain the behavior because, all right, people are people, right? They're not objects. And if a narcissist was to use a person, that feels really bad. Like you can't use a person. So what the narcissist has to do is to objectify people, is to turn people into objects that the narcissist can then use to meet their own needs,
Right.
which prevents them from having to be vulnerable and experience intimacy to let real people in to help them and meet their needs. So they objectify people to create this barrier, to protect their image, and then use these objects like tools to advance their image. You go to Hollywood, you go to LA, I mean, that's everything that's happening. I'm in Nashville, the music industry, right?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of this behavior where you have to objectify people in order to use them to advance the image.
Right.
Yeah. And so this happens in relationships.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah.
Yes. I get you. And thank you for that clarification, because I know that there is always a separation, but I usually lump them together, narcissists and sociopaths.
Yeah. Well, they're easy to go together. Yeah.
But I'm glad for that clarification, and you said it. Oh wow!
Yeah,
I'm so ahead of with my intellectual knowledge after this conversation.
It's a real important distinction because it really helps you understand it better. And the biggest thing in all of this, and why I teach this is all in the book, by the way. So if people are interested in this, there's a whole chapter on all these things. But the reason I wrote it in this book was not to, and it does help people identify the narcissist in their life, but it's usually to identify the narcissistic patterns in ourselves. Like, how are we unknowingly, unwittingly being narcissistic? Does it mean you have narcissistic personality disorder, right? This is not a mental health diagnostic here, or diagnosis. This is saying that there are these tendencies, these patterns and strategies where many of us are narcissistic or doing narcissistic things. It doesn't make us a full-blown narcissist clinically, but we're still doing that stuff that creates suffering, that still keeps people out, that still isolates us and keeps us living with a persona and a mask while we go through life feeling like a fraud, like an imposter.
Right. Yes. Wow. It's true. And of course, the biggest where you can find that is social media, because
Oh
everybody is
yeah.
presenting an
Yep.
image there.
Well, so this is an example I use all the time. So
Yeah.
we create these Instagram profiles, these
Yes.
avatars. It's a
Right.
curated feed of an image that we want
Yes.
to project into the world
Yes.
for
Yes.
people to see us as.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so
Yes. And then that image becomes more important than
the
real.
real person. Yeah,
Yes.
exactly.
Yes. I
For
got you.
ourselves and other people. And so we have a world now where we have our little avatars and other person's little avatar.
Mhm.
My hands here are who we really are. And then
Mhm.
now you have these avatars interfacing with each other, trying to be lovable, trying to be loved, trying to be lovable, trying to be loved. And there's no access to who we really are. And you can see it through social media. You're interfacing with an image, not the real person. Even
Right.
as even if you're as authentic as you want to be on the social media, it's still a curated image. It's not
Right.
who you really are. And so my
Yes.
invitation is for people,
Mhm.
you can still have social media, but drop the image internally. I can look at someone's social media feed and know exactly how they see the world. Because how you do one thing is how you do everything.
Yeah.
People
Yeah.
will post
Exactly.
stuff and pictures through their own lens of distortion perception of how they want to be perceived. And
Yeah.
so you can reverse engineer that and say, oh, well, this is how the person thinks beauty is. You have people coming on and they have all these filters on. They're literally distorting themselves because they think they're going to be more beautiful or lovable, when in reality, it's making them more ugly. It's taking them further from their true self. Who they
Yeah.
really are is beautiful if they allow themselves to feel that beauty coming through them. Otherwise, you have the media and magazines and advertisers are saying you're not beautiful enough. You must look
Right.
like this in order to be
Yes.
lovable. And
Wow.
it's creating so much pain and suffering, especially for, younger people.
I love that. I love that. Boy, you just sold me on getting your book. Is it an Audible or is it just you have it
Yep.
in Audible?
Yep. I have
Okay.
hardcover. I
Okay.
have paperback. I have Audible, where
Yeah.
I narrate it myself,
Good. Yes.
and
And
Kindle.
that's how I consume books. I walk and I listen. So I'm definitely good at yes, because you've tickled my I love about the narcissists and the psychopaths, and I don't know why, but I'm always trending towards them. And of course I want to know what my faults are. So that's amazing. All right. So let's talk about your book, Awaken to Your True Self. It is a #1 Amazon bestseller. And why do you think that so many people are resonating with it? Like me, I'm listening now and I'm resonating in it. So tell us about your book. You mentioned this, you've got 18 chapters. We've talked about the victim mentality, and we've talked about the narcissist. You can give us a couple more of the things that you talk about in there, and then you can tell us, why you wrote it.
Yeah, so I think a lot of people are responding to it because it's real. There's depth to it. There's a lot of bestsellers, New York Times bestsellers. There's a lot of stuff out there. Bless their heart. They've made it. They're successful, and maybe it's helping people. That's great. But my clients, the people that I work with, crave depth. A lot of these books talk down to you like you're the least common denominator in America. I don't do that. My book is for smart, successful people who also happen to be stuck in something in their life. So it is not a beginner book, although if you've never studied any of this before, it's still approachable. It's intense. It's a very confronting book. I'll read through some of the chapter titles so you get an idea. But
Mhm.
I really wrote this because I was tired of looking out into the world and seeing fluff. It really hurt. And I also was tired of seeing fake books. What I mean by that are things that there's one concept in it, and then they have to turn one concept, and write 40,000 words just to make it a book. Or someone's famous and they just write a book just because they're famous.
Mhm.
Or I've discovered some of my favorite authors don't even write their own books. They're ghostwritten. And it's just this big whole marketing business thing, which is fine. But there's just something that always never sat right with me with this. So this is a book I wrote myself. There's no ghostwriter. I have a lot more books to write. You know, there's going to be like 15 books at least in my life.
Nice.
So I'm in this for the long haul. This isn't a marketing book, a gimmick, because then you read the books where they're like, oh, here's the problem. Now sign up for my $500,000 course, you know, in order to get any value. Now, I do have stuff for people that if they want deeper help, because there's stuff that you just can't get from a book, like you actually need real feedback. But I really wanted some cinesomatics. Yes, exactly.
Right.
And but I wanted to literally have a book and say, if you're somebody who's already done personal development or spiritual work and you're still stuck, everything you need to know is in this book. I promise. And so I wrote this book. So you asked that question, why did you write it? For these reasons, and specifically because I had spent 15 years of my life doing, oh my God, hours of EFT, NLP, hypnotherapy, regular therapy, alternative medicine, holistic health. I've done psychedelic plant medicines. I mean, everything besides pharmaceutical drugs. I've pretty much done it, tried it. As crazy or weird as it was, I was willing to do whatever it took. And some of it helped, a lot of it didn't, but nothing really broke me through. And so it was this embodiment piece, this feeling piece, this video feedback piece that worked when nothing else did. And so this book was a culmination of the 18 chapters I have of all of the lessons, a comprehensive, so it's a breadth and depth. It's wide and deep, not either or none, which a lot of books are, of the actual things that took me and all of my clients that made the difference between doing all the work and still being stuck and actually breaking through and waking up and coming out of suffering, or breaking through plateaus, or having the relationship, or making the millions, or whatever it is. So I wrote this book because there was nothing else like it. If there was, I would have written it.
I would have read it. I have not heard anything else like it yet. Yes. Yeah.
So I did that.
I would even have a problem showing you how to make money. I'm sitting here thinking, how do I show him how to make money? I mean, do I talk? Do I count it?
Well, all of that stuff's connected to something. So you may be somebody that's maybe a little too much in their head.
Yeah, that's what I said. I'm going to get your book because I want to learn about me.
Well, exactly.
Anyway, go ahead. Yeah. So what are some of the other chapters?
Yeah. So I'll just name them. So the first one's your Stucky story. This is about our stories that bind us to the past. The things we just keep telling ourselves about why things just don't work or how they are. Yeah. The next one is about vulnerability and change. People want to create change at behavioral or attitude or mindset levels, where what I teach is it's not about becoming something you're not. It's about subtracting all of the things that you're not to get you closer to who you really are. Right? All of the beliefs we've picked up, all of the traumas, all of the limiting beliefs, all of the stories about how we are and how people should treat us, that's the stuff to subtract rather than adding on strategies and tactics and techniques. Next one's called An Equation for Suffering. So this one's more like it's like a math equation where I go over how we actually stay suffering, and what is a very, very simple formula that robs us of our peace. The next is When Intellect Slows You Down, and we talked about that one. That one's about ego, intellect, intelligence, intuition. The next one is The Most Important Person, which is all about narcissism and our image. The next one's called The Spiritual Path is Failing You. which is really interesting because it's a very spiritual book, but there's something about trying to ascend and avoiding our humanity that doesn't work, that a lot of people get caught up into, right? It's the kingdom of heaven is on earth. It is within you. It is here.
This is within you.
Yeah,
Yes, it is. Jesus
it's
said
it.
that. Right.
Yeah,
Mhm.
exactly.
Mhm.
Well, he knew what he was talking about.
He does. Right. Yeah.
And if we actually apply that, we realize, oh, it's in our body. It's in our flesh.
Yeah.
It's embodied in our flesh. It's really it. This is kind of a foundation of cinesomatics. It's in our literal flesh.
Yes. Yes.
And so there's the victim trap, which talks about victimhood, avoidance of life, which talks about how we avoid the very things that would move us forward. And then the last one of part one is stop fixing and start living, about talking about we have this addiction to fixing ourselves until we're ready to live. Just perfection as a prison.
You ain't got to get ready, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Just get out there.
Yes. Love it.
Then the second part's moving forward. A universal approach which talks about as above, so below, how you do one thing, how you do everything. When wrong works, which is that reverse wiring that I told you about.
Mm-hmm.
The essential external, which talks about feedback, which is you can't figure it all out in yourself. You need feedback from the world and other people. Your life's not about you, which is sort of the remedy to the narcissism. Dragons and their treasures, which talks about shadow, doing real shadow work and going into the places that we reject and judge and hate and avoid in ourselves and in the world. Just stop, which is all about stopping, literally a chapter that just is like stop, 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 stop.
Okay.
Arriving to now, which talks about being present and anxiety. Then there's a new way to move, which talks about embodiment. And then the final one is above all else. And this one is where I talk about everything in the book. If you put these 5 principles and tenets above everything else in your life, you cannot help but to transform, to change.
That's beautiful. So did you give any examples in your book about the cinesomatic feeling movements?
Yep, in that chapter is kind of the culmination of the whole book.
In the last chapter there?
It's the second to last. It's the penultimate chapter.
All right. Okay.
And in there, there's the embodied story exercise, which I actually take people through a full exercise of using video and their movement from what they've learned in the rest of the book to experience the teachings in the book through this movement embodiment practice. So that's the place where when I talk about as above, so below, victimhood, narcissism, when I talk about that stuff, that's an actual, tangible, practical, applicable exercise people can do to make all of the lessons in the book real for them.
I love it. I love it. I love it. Awesome. All right. Well, you just sold me on it. So I'm just going to pick it up. All right. So tell us how, our listeners can connect with you, with your website. I'm assuming your book is on Amazon.
Yep.
If you're on social media, what are your social media handles and things like that?
Yeah. It's not on social media. I do have a YouTube channel.
Okay.
And you can find everything at andrewdaniel.org. So you can learn more about cinesomatics. You can learn about the book, get a copy of the book in any format you want, read reviews. And once you read the book, I recommend anybody before they want to work with me to read the book. You'll see if I'm your cup of tea, if this is something you really want to confront yourself with and actually make real new changes in your life. Read the book first. And then if I have any availability, you can also book an assessment and experience cinesomatics for yourself.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Love it. Love it. Love it. All right, Andrew, this has been an illuminating conversation. I learned quite a bit of things from you today. Yes. And so I mean, it's really interesting. You know, we talked about holistic sex, we talked about narcissism, we talked about victimhood. You know, we talked about, you know, quite a bit of things,
Covered a lot of
image
ground.
and all
Yeah.
that stuff. Yeah, I mean, this was full blown, and we got it done in an hour.
That's a record for me.
That's great. So thank you so much for coming on the show and expanding our mind today regarding you know, victimhood and becoming our true self, and you know, having feedback instead of being stuck, or instead of being unaware, to be quite honest, because a lot of people are not even stuck, they're just unaware.
Yep.
Right, they're just not getting the results, and they don't know why. And you've said it, there are certain people that have been spending all kinds of money on in these self-improvement courses, and not getting anywhere, but that's the market that we're in.
Yep.
So yes, you have a very unique niche, and that is, you know, feedback through video, and trying to understand yourself. And I love what you said. You know, how you show up for one thing is how you show up for the next thing, and that's very, very true. So, well, listen, guys, your mind should have been expanded. Definitely run out and pick up Andrew's book if you really want to make some changes in your life. And even if you learn one or a few things, you will, you know, understanding your true self is always, always very important, because that's the only way you can find true happiness. Other than that, like you know, Andrew says, you know, you might not be a narcissist, but you're living on that mask, and you're living what you think you should be, and never who you truly are, right? So and you know, books are an inexpensive way of learning things, as he's talked about. You know, people charging $500,000 for courses, and that's an exaggeration, but the average is $5,000, $10,000, $20,000. Get a book and learn a few things. So, and then if you want to take it further, like Andrew says, then you can get an assessment. So thank you guys for tuning in to the Transform Your Mind to Transform Your Life. This is what I bring you every week. Like you heard me say, I bring on guests with content because I want to show value to you. And today you've got bonuses. We were already supposed to be talking about victimhood, and you got bonuses. So thank you, Andrew. As we wrap up, any last words?
No, thank you so much. I had a fun time here. Thank you again.
Yeah, we had a good conversation. You know, we bonded. All right, guys. Now, a transcript of my conversation with Andrew will be on the show page, which is blog.myhelps.us, and would also link out to his book and also his website and his YouTube channel. So you can, you know, you can start off by going to the show page, or again, you can just go directly to Andrew's page, which is andrewdaniel.org. So thanks for tuning in. And if you're listening to this on iTunes, would love for you to rate and review. If you're watching this on YouTube, then I would love for you to subscribe, because I bring you a very quality guests every week, like Andrew, so that you can transform your mind to transform your life. So thanks, Andrew. And until next time, namaste.
Bye. Thank you.
You're welcome.